Coming up on the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast.
The way I got to that incredible breakthrough performance that surprised even my wildest dreams. I was dreaming of a top 10 finish in this race, and here I was way in front of everybody, first across the line, and the media swarmed me at the finish line, and they had two questions for me. The first one was, hey, did you do the whole course? And number two was, what's your name? So it was pretty funny, but I got to that point by allowing the process of improvement to happen naturally. I did not force anything. I didn't have pressure and sponsors and media attention looking at me and seeing my every move and tracking my progress. It was all up to me to do this in an intuitive and graceful manner. And it's the most important lesson that I have to share from those years of competing at the highest level was like, you have to let things unfold naturally and intuitively instead of always forcing the results to happen that you think you should have. And this is the pace that you should run on Tuesday because some coach told you to maintain this pace or do this many reps. So I think we can all back up a little bit from the OCD approach to fitness and realize that if we establish good sleeping habits and good stress management habits and enjoy what we're doing, don't attach your self-esteem to the outcome of what you're doing, that's when you can improve and truly, express your full potential and even go beyond what you thought was your potential.
Hello, and welcome to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. I'm Brian Gryn, and I'm here to give you actionable tips to get your body back to what it once was 5, 10, even 15 years ago. Each week, I'll give you an in-depth interview with a health expert from around the world to cut through the fluff and get you long-term sustainable results. This week, I interviewed best-selling author, former professional triathlete, and podcast host of the B-Rad podcast, Brad Kearns. We discussed Brad's rise through the ranks of being a professional triathlete in the 80s, along with the importance of Zone 1 training, the problems with restrictive diets, the value of having muscle mass as we age, hormetic stressors in recovery, and much, much more. Really enjoyed my interview with Brad. This was our 5th one, and I think our best. So thanks so much for listening, and enjoy the show. All right, welcome to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. My name is Brian Gryn, and I have on for the 40th time, Brad Kearns. No.
Yeah, here we go, man. Checking in again.
Yep, checking in. I think it's good to come in and check in with Brad every so often. I envy him when I'm in my, what are you, in your 50s?
58, man.
58. I'd like to.
Feeling great.
Yeah, be in your shape. How are you feeling? How's everything with you?
Well, the big challenge here in the older age groups is to stay out there and not get injured. So I have all these elaborate performance goals and I want to do this time and clear this bar in the high jump and, excel in speed golf. But now like all those have floated down way below my number one and most daunting and compelling athletic performance goal, which is don't get injured. And then number 2 and number 3 are the same. And then we start to drip in and focus on performance. But I'm constantly learning. And one of the big takeaways is that we need to respect this idea of performing under the radar more. And instead, what we have in fitness industry culture is like this glorification of crushing workouts and slamming a killer session. And I was so torched after, and all the languaging that we use and all the bro speak and just the celebration of pushing yourself. And that's how you get fit. And it's complete bullshit for anyone at any age group. The younger folks can get away with it more than I can, but my days of crushing workouts are no longer. Now, I will crush a competition, hopefully, because I'll be carefully preparing my body, taking care of it, leaving a little bit in the tank at every workout. And then when it's time to go all out and have a true peak performance effort, like, hey, someone's training for the New York City Marathon and they can't wait and their friends are going and we're going to fly there. It's going to be awesome. Well, don't leave that that final part of the well that you go to run 26 miles. Don't leave that on your last 3 20-mile runs. It's ludicrous, but we've been socialized to perform this way. And I have a lot of good things to say about CrossFit. And then some of the stuff is like, why are you guys going in there and screaming and cheering for each other to do 3 more reps on a typical workout day? save that for the freaking CrossFit games when you're on TV. And if you're performing, in a recreational manner, and this is just part of a hectic, high stress balance attempt to be balanced lifestyle, go down 2 to 3 notches with every single workout that you do. And over time, you're going to progress gracefully and gradually to higher and higher fitness levels. Here's the funny part. Elite athletes know this. So by and large, dudes like Eliud Kipchoge or Asefa, the female that just ran 2:11 marathon, one of the most sensational endurance performances of all time, they train well within themselves at every single workout. They're not puking on the side of the track like Rocky Balboa. That was a movie. But the average recreational fitness enthusiast training for a marathon or going to CrossFit, look at their heart rate, look at their blood levels afterward, whatever you want to measure. They're training, quote unquote, if you're watching on video, I'm making quotes, they're training harder than some of the greatest athletes in the world by comparison to relative effort. And we also must remark that the elite athletes are genetically gifted. So they can go slam very impressive workouts at 87% of maximum capacity, like Jakob Ingebrigtsen, and wake up the next morning and feel okay. But if you go out and do an 87% lactate threshold session, you might need 3 days recovery. So maybe you should go 80% or 78%. And if you do the math, which I have done with taking great advice from people that are advising me with sprinting, and I do 80% effort on 200-meter repeats, it's so slow, it's ridiculous. It's like, why do I even go to the track? I can do this in the parking lot. But that's how the elite athletes train. They train within their capacity and they keep building and building, building. And now if we talk 3 months later, my 80% is going to be a couple seconds faster. Guess what's going to happen to my race time? Again, a couple seconds faster. And that's the way to improve rather than slam yourself into the wall over and over and over in hopes that you're going to get stronger and tougher. And thank you for listening to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast.
Okay, we've run out of time.
That's all we need to say to everybody. Yeah,
we've run out of time. No. So it's interesting you bring up injuries. I mean, I recently tried to push myself a little bit as far as doing a sumo deadlift, which is just a wider version of a deadlift, which I'm not used to, and did a little heavier than normal. Nothing crazy. I think I got like 5-6 reps, but I think that at least my experience, as I've gotten like 40 plus, you can still get results and not have to necessarily push too much with the weight, and keep the volume up. I think, when you're in your 20s, it's like, okay, you can do those lower rep points. Not to say that there's plenty of people who are in their 40s that are doing heavy weights, but I just think the risk maybe is not really the return for doing heavier weights isn't really worth it as much, because if you do get injured, which I did tweak my hip, now I'm out for a week, right? So that just sets me back. So like you said,
a week. What are you talking about, man? I was just talking to my physical therapist before we got on because I strained my hip flexor, a mild strain of the hip flexor. And I'm like, dude, this is 2 weeks ago. How long this thing's going to last? And he says, typically 4 to 10 weeks. I'm like, 4 to 10 weeks for a mild muscle strain. It takes 4 to 10 weeks to recover. So when we dip into the well and make a mistake, the penalty is massively huge. And we can't accept this anymore, but it's part of fitness culture, like I said. So we really need to take a step back and go, what am I doing to my body when I show up in the gym or head out onto the roads and trails, and really think about the intent of the training session, where it lands in the big picture schedule, and also to rein in that misplaced competitive intensity where you feel like you have to race yourself or your training partner at every workout.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like trying to find the fine line between doing too heavy and like low reps versus a lot of reps and like just not getting anywhere with that. So I think you got to sort of try. I mean, you'll hear like hypertrophy training, 10 to 12 reps, but it's been shown that you can build muscle doing 20 reps. I think the key is like you have to have some type of effort, right? There has to be some type of fatigue involved, and I think you can get that fatigue whether it's 20 reps, 12 or 3. And I think just as I've gotten older, like I've gotten away from the 3 to 4 to 5 rep range, and I went back to it and look what happened. So anyways, we could talk all about that, but, so So, all right.
Yeah,
And
that's a good
so,
point. I mean,
yeah, I mean,
yeah,
go ahead.
it's
I'm,
safer to do more reps with less weight, is what you're saying. Safer and possibly getting to the same destination.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And even using machines. I think before I used to not use machines as much, and there's a little more stability involved, especially if you don't have a spotter. So that, yeah, I think it's a lot of sort of a lot of different angles you can take on that. But like you said, like it's not like who wants to get injured? Obviously, we're not training to get injured, but um, I think you can be smart about it and not get away with things that you could have gotten away with maybe when you were in your 20s. So,
Yep. Even then, I mean, I was a professional racer in my 20s. I was on the triathlon circuit for 9 years, and I made a lot of mistakes that cost me dearly on the race course and very high profile and high stakes and high prize purse. And I wasn't quite at my best. And so this thing that went around, I think Paul Huddle made it up, an old time triathlete. It's better to be 10% undertrained than 2% overtrained. And it's totally true, because when it's time to ask a lot of your body, if you've been taking care of it and keeping something in reserve, you're going to be able to go to the powerlifting meet and go for a 1 rep max more than you've ever done before. But if you keep training at 93% of your 1 rep max, you're going to cook out a joint or a connective tissue or the central nervous system. And it's just not the way to improve. And again, I'm going to emphasize the example set by the elite athletes, where they're probably shaking their heads looking at these people that are, sharing the same running track with them or the same gym, going, wow, that guy's pushing it so hard. What's his problem?
yeah. Yeah. And on another note, I wanted to talk about some of the things. I mean, how long have you been in the health world for?
A long time, man. I guess
Back in the day, you started with
yeah.
Mark Sisson, or did you start before that? I mean, you've been in the you were a professional triathlete. And
yeah,
then,
interestingly, I mean, I was a failed runner in college. I kept getting sick and injured, so I turned over to this new sport called triathlon. This is in the 80s, and I loved it so much as a recreational pursuit. But then when I got into the job market, I got slapped in the face by the realities of life. And like, it was so miserable. I was working for the world's largest accounting firm. It was a prestigious position to land out of college. And I had my suit and tie. And here I was on the career track. And I only lasted 11 weeks because it was so depressing and I just hated it. And at that point I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to, take control of my life, and I'm going to quit this job, and I'm going to pursue a career as a professional triathlete. Wow. And it was a complete folly back then, because there was no professionalism. There was a few guys making money from endorsements, and they were the legends of the sport back then, the winner of the Ironman, like Dave Scott. But I just kept my dream alive, and I kept training, and I was doing it from a place of pure motivation. And so I love my life experience so much. I didn't have to motivate myself to drag my ass over to the pool or to get out on the trail every single morning. And so the entire experience was really fulfilling and valuable to me. And I took great care of my body because I was just enamored with the challenge of getting better and getting faster. And I was way, way behind the best guys, but I kept dreaming, if I stick to it and I keep this nice, pure and approach full of love and appreciation, things would work out for me. And at the end of my very first year on the pro circuit, I was just this unknown rookie. I had this breakthrough race, and I upset the undefeated #1 ranked athlete in the world. And so all of a sudden I went from former accountant having a folly of a year sabbatical to try to screw around and swim, bike, and run. And now all of a sudden it was clear that I had a career track in front of me as an athlete. But I'm telling you this little tale here because the way I got to that incredible breakthrough performance that surprised even my wildest dreams, I was dreaming of a top 10 finish in this race. And here I was way in front of everybody, first across the line. And the media swarmed me at the finish line, and they had 2 questions for me. The first one was, hey, did you do the whole course? And number 2 was, what's your name? So it was pretty funny, but I got to that point by allowing the process of improvement to happen naturally. I did not force anything. I didn't have pressure and sponsors and media attention looking at me and seeing my every move and tracking my progress. It was all up to me to do this in an intuitive and graceful manner. And it's the most important lesson that I have to share from those years of competing at the highest level was like, you have to let things unfold naturally and intuitively instead of always forcing the results to happen that you think you should have. And this is the pace that you should run on Tuesday because some coach told you to maintain this pace or do this many reps. So I think we can all back up a little bit from the OCD approach to fitness and realize that if we establish good sleeping habits and good stress management habits and enjoy what we're doing, don't attach your self-esteem to the outcome of what you're doing, that's when you can improve and truly, express your full potential and even go beyond what you thought was your potential.
So you had a breakthrough in your first year of racing. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was about the time when the season was ending and I was going to have to go get a job delivering pizzas or even worse, crawl with my tail between my legs back to the accounting firm. So there was some pressure there, but I wasn't looking at it like that. It wasn't like do or die. But I should, before we move on, like put a footnote to the story because what soon happened as I became a prominent, prospect or rising person to watch on the pro circuit, was then I started to put pressure on myself. Right. I started to pay attention more to writing down every little nuance of my workouts because now Brad Kearns wasn't an anonymous guy. He was really important and one of the favorites. And look at this article in the magazine and look at these people calling me and paying attention to me. And guess what happened when I start to get into a more regimented, serious, focused approach? That's right. I overtrained and struggled and went out and got my ass kicked. And the people are like, well, I guess he was a flash in the pan or something. And I'm like, wait. No, I've just been screwing things up because I'm taking myself too seriously. So as you know, the former title of my podcast was the Get Over Yourself podcast. And that was, one of the great lessons I had to learn that, look, whatever happens out there, you got to do your best. You can't be attached to the results so much that you get in your own way, which is what type A, highly motivated, goal-oriented, driven people do. They just, they mess things up with their misplaced competitive intensity.
Well, and you see this all the time in sport, right? With results come expectations. And with those expectations, that's when things can go wrong, right? You see this with golf all the time, right? These guys win a major and then you don't hear about them for years. Look at like Rory McIlroy came out of the in the pro circuit as like the next best thing. I mean, he's unbelievable, obviously, but he won a bunch of majors. I think he won 4 majors within his first few years. And everyone's like, oh my God, he's going to break Nicklaus's record. Hasn't won a major in
8 years.
Yeah, I was going to say 9 years and still looking to win a major. He's won plenty of tournaments and he's been highly successful. But someone told you that it was going to take him 10 years and he still wasn't going to win something as far as a major, you'd think he was crazy. But so, and I'm just curious. So you won that race in your first year. How many more years did you race? And then did you feel like you met up to those expectations as you went?
Yeah, my career lasted 9 years, and actually it took me 4 or 5 more years to truly hit a peak. Okay. I was 2-time national champion. I was ranked number 3 in the world. And then after that, I was so tired from traveling around the world and kicking butt and I won 7 races in a row at one point. I was on top and everything was locked in and it seemed easy and effortless when I was at my very best. And then the body gets tired. And in the case of, elite level professional athletics, sometimes you just don't get it back. And that's why you see, Klay Thompson, one of the greatest shooters and all around all-star basketball players of all time. And now, my friends are saying he's a step down from what he was. And so is James Harden. And so is this superstar. And so is that superstar. And it's tough to stay up there. So I started feeling my body not recovering and not performing quite at that level. And I think it's really valuable in the field of athletics because it's so graphic and black and white. So I would have like this training one of my favorite training runs was get to the bottom of the river canyon and climb a pretty steep, windy hill to the green gate at the top. And my best time was 15 flat. And if I take you out there now and show you what a 15 flat is, this is a guy who can win races on the world circuit, right? And then a year later, I'm feeling pretty good. I'm going to train. I'm going to go test myself. And I show up at the gate and it says 16:11. I'm like, what the F is this, man? It was the same effort expenditure, but that's when you get slapped in the face like, well, dude, you got on too many airplanes, you did too many races, you shot your wad, and now you're in a fatigue or a recovery cycle. And there's not too many easy ways to get out of that. And so my career ended really gracefully because, I was getting 4th, 7th, 8th, 17th, 3rd, first in a little crappy race that no one cared about. And I couldn't fool myself any longer to realize that, like, I guess, when an athlete's at their peak, they never know it's their peak. They just think, hey, we're going to go for a dynasty now. We won the NBA title. We're going to come back and win 3 more in a row. Nah, I don't think so. And in my case, like, my peak came and went, and then I have to look back and go, I guess that was my peak.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did you find that, was there more money in the sport as you went along? And, like, did you find like the prize pools went up and endorsements and things like that? Or
yeah, the interesting thing about a sport like triathlon is it's very minor. So the 100th ranked money winner on the PGA Tour is getting several $1 million a year in earnings, and the 800th ranked golfer in the world is probably making a decent living, so where he can go and tee it up and play golf. But in triathlon, if one were to win a race, the income would be somewhere around 10x if you got 4th or 5th or 6th. And so when I was mentioning my placements there in the last couple of years of my career, it's not as much fun when you're getting 4th, 7th, 11th, 17th, and 9th versus first, third, first, third, first, second. And so, it was a great run.
In the year you won those, when you went on that run, like, if you don't mind, like, what did you make for first place? I'd just be curious. Like, was it do you remember?
Like a good prize purse would be like, 5,000 or so for the winner, maybe more. And then you get a lot of bonuses behind the scenes. And that was all due to, like, negotiation. Like, if somebody didn't want to pay me money, I'd say, okay, well, why don't you just bonus me for first, second, and third position? And so some of these sponsors, they could have got me for cheaper, right? I would wear your sunglasses for, $5,000 a year. But if you couldn't afford that or didn't believe in me, then I'm going to stick it to you for, $1,500 every time I win a race. And, oh, by the way, I won, 9 times this year. That you start to get. So it's all top heavy is what I'm trying to say. Okay. And that's the same for a golfer and the same for anybody, where you win that major title and then you start signing deals and everything goes crazy, but we forgot who got second and third and fourth. And it's totally fair. Like, I resented it at first when I was a young athlete trying to make it and, hoping to not deliver pizzas in the winter. And, you'd learn what the guy that just beat you by 1 minute and 14 seconds, but he's making 3 times as much money as I am. Well, that's not fair. They don't have that in the accounting firm when, you're one of the best CPAs, but not quite the superstar. Mm-hmm. You're making the same salary or whatever. But in racing, you either complain about it and stay mired there, or you do something about it. And I've had some great mentors come along, especially when I was an athlete. And I think this was maybe this is how we got started on this, is you asked me a question about Sisson. He was my coach when I was a young professional triathlete. And so he was a big help in helping me open my mind to a more evolved approach to training than the typical high mileage approach, which was, the centerpiece of all these endurance sports. It's like, how many hours a week can you train? And the more hours you can train, the faster you're going to get. And that's true up to a point where you can get in the top 5% of the field by working really hard and putting in the hours. And then it's like, wait a second, how am I going to go from 14th place to first, second, or third? And that's when you have to get smart and pick your spots and push the body hard on occasion to achieve a fitness breakthrough, and then allow for a lot of recovery. And that was Sisson's, claim to famous. He was the first guy to say, hey, look, it's kind of stupid to pound your head against the pavement every day. Why don't you just do things like breakthrough workouts, was his term, where, I'd go and ride my bike. Instead of 5 hours for the longest ride, I upped my longest ride to 7.5 hours in one day. I'm spending all day on my bike. But guess what I'm doing the next couple of days? I'm walking over to the video store. I'm renting a few movies. I'm swimming 15 minutes to stretch. And then I take a 2-hour nap and watch 3 movies to end my night. And that's how you break through from 14th to possibly winning the race, is you push the body and you get a breakthrough, but you let it, soak in and settle and absorb.
Yeah. Focus on recovery. Well, that's interesting. I didn't know all that about your career. I mean, 9 years is a long time. There's people, I'm sure, who, you almost quit after a year, like you said, but you had a breakthrough. I mean, you look at like golf, some of these guys are going for decades and they're still trying to break through. And it just sort of, there's a lot of luck. There's a lot of luck that has to happen, right? And to win at a high level and, timing and things like that. Cause there's a lot of, I just keep comparing it to golf because that's all I know, but there's a lot of unbelievable great golfers that we've never even heard of. They haven't broken through at the right time. So I'm sure.
I mean, I think in athletics, we're now seeing, breakthroughs in research and psychology, and there's so much more to it where, your mannerisms and your self-talk and your verbal talk to others, you can pick apart these things that leave us mired in slumps or mired at a certain level. Self-sabotage is very common. They talk about it with relation to relationships, career advancement, and all these things where we don't feel deserving of being a champion. And so we push our body too hard in training to be exhausted so that we never truly test ourselves and try to become a champion in the race. So when I talk about spending the afternoon watching videos and relaxing, it took a lot of confidence and it took a lot of courage. And it helps to go climb, for 7 hours the previous day and realize that you had a sense of accomplishment there. But to back off from this obsession with accomplishing something every day and getting a sweat and getting a workout every day, for the average, recreational fitness enthusiast, it's really important to give your body a break at times and go into the gym and do a workout at 50% capacity. I mean, most people would laugh. Imagine going through your next workout at 50% because you have a slight scratchy throat and the weather's changing and you're not quite right. Well, go do a 50%. That means 4 reps of half the weight than you do at your best session. It's almost nothing, but it delivers a tremendous cardiovascular and muscle strengthening effect. And as soon as you get up out of your chair and go for a walk, you're in training. You're doing a steady state cardio and you're getting a fantastic fitness experience. It's just not stressful and strenuous, so we don't respect it as much.
And just one more point, we'll move on, is I'll just say that, like, I think for individuals, especially 40, 50 plus, and if you're doing resistance training, if you're very intentional when you're lifting and you're really focusing not only on pushing that weight up, right, the concentric, but the eccentric motion where it's coming back down, where it's been proven that that's a great way to help build muscle. And what I've noticed is when I'm really intentional and I slow the tempo, like, I don't need a lot of weight. And so that would be my advice for a lot of people, especially as they're getting up there, is you don't need to try to push so much weight. And you see this all the time in the gym where they're not even controlling it on the way down, but you're almost wasting half the lift. And so I just think that if you are doing resistance training, especially as you get older, if you really focusing on the negative part of it, you can get a ton of benefit from that and not have to worry about trying to lug up heavy weights if you focus on that part of the lift. So
love it, man. And to make an analogy to the endurance athletes listening, when you just go out there for some breezy exercise at very low heart rate, you are getting a fantastic aerobic training effect. You're activating the same aerobic energy producing enzymes and muscle fibers that you are when you're doing an all-out time trial or a race. And so walking and easy pedaling and going into the gym and looking at the TV and just pedaling for 45 minutes, is, it gives tremendous value to the overall development of your aerobic system and building your endurance. And when I was training at the highest level during my triathlon career, I would do a huge chunk of my mileage running and biking at heart rates that were 20, 30, 40, 50 beats below my aerobic maximum, my fat max heart rate. Today, if I'm 20 or 30 beats below my fat max heart rate, I'm walking slowly or I'm barely pedaling the bike. It happened that I was fit enough where I could run 8-minute miles and still have a heart rate of 115 or something, with my aerobic maximum being 155 and my absolute maximum being 195. So I'm running, 80 beats below max heart rate as a good chunk of my training. Let's say half of my running mileage was just out there jogging and conditioning the body and preparing the body for those hard workouts, like when I ran from the bottom of the canyon up to the Green Gate in 15 minutes. But you have to maintain that aerobic base for virtually every sport. It needs this aerobic conditioning effect. And I think, it's now getting prominent. You hear people talk about zone 2 cardio. Dr. Attia has it in his best-selling book, and everyone's talking about zone 2 this and zone 2 that. And I'm sitting here raising my hand in the crowd saying, what about zone 1? I mean, we got to give zone 1 some more love. And that's a walk around the block with the dog, or a hike on the weekend where you're hiking with the new date you just met online, and you're going way slower than you usually do. And you're totally good with it because you're having a good time talking, and your heart rate's down in a very comfortable fat burning zone that's not going to tax you. It's not going to spike stress hormones in the bloodstream, and it's not going to, compromise your development when you put in a more difficult workout the next day.
Love it. And getting back to what I was originally going to ask is, you've been in the health business for a long time. Business as a runner, and now you're a podcast host, author. You have a great protein out there. You got a nut butter. But either way, I wanted to ask you, the main question was, and you can tell me, let's say we could start with 3 things that you have changed your mind on, let's just say in health and wellness in general, from back when you were, started out till now. What have you changed your mind on?
This is great. I think I'm going to have 6 by the time we're done. Some of them we've already touched on. One of them is this concept of crushing workouts. And,
right.
I thought that in order to beat the guy who was still up in front of me on the road by 1 minute in a 2-hour race, I thought it was just, okay, push myself a little harder at the next few workouts and dig deeper when I'm running up the steep hill. But in reality, it's, being patient, developing really carefully and intelligently, and then laying it out there. And you're going to have your day if you train carefully and appropriately. And then as a side note, there's a lot of genetics involved in professional sports and at any level. So if we look at the New York City Marathon, they had 51,700 finishers this year. One of the biggest races of all time. And we're standing at the finish line, starting with the first guy coming in at 2:04. And we stay there for the next several hours until we see the people coming in at 6 and 7 hours. Where do you fall in the pack? A lot of that is determinant by your genetics. There's also a lot by your training, but like the guys who are running 2:30 versus the guys who are running 3, the guys running 3:30, and the guys running 4, everyone's enjoying themselves, hopefully, but you're going to try to do the best you can and be content and satisfied with wherever you finish. And I mentioned my career highlights. I was ranked number 3 in the world. And at that time, I would sometimes dream maybe I could make it to number 1 and beat the guys who are, still superior to me. And then I'd go and train with them a little bit and realize that wasn't really my goal. So looking in the mirror and saying, no, what Brad Kearns wants to do is he wants to do it his way. I want to enjoy myself. I want to lead a somewhat balanced lifestyle. It's not win or die for me. And there's guys that I'm competing with that are one step up from that rung, saying, yeah, it's pretty much win or die for me. And I don't give a F about anything else. And I give these guys a lot of credit. We've celebrated the competitive intensity of Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan and all this, but you don't really want to switch places with guys like that because they're consumed and tormented by their absolute desperate necessity to win. And I thought there was a better way and a more nuanced way and a way that I could inspire and motivate others along the way rather than being this focused, arrogant, egotistical asshole number one athlete. And, that was what my commitment was. And I don't think it slowed me down, but there's also that genetic component where it's like, you're probably doing the best you can. And why don't you have a smile and be happy and be satisfied with your own personal best?
Okay. So number one.
Yeah, that was number one crushing workouts and punishing yourself in the interest of getting better. Yeah.
Okay. And then what else have you changed your mind on?
Well, I guess we've talked about this, so we can go quickly through these because we've talked about the reevaluation of what I'll say, quote unquote, restrictive diets. So restricting carbohydrates, restricting time periods, restricting other macronutrients, restricting calories. For a healthy, fit, energetic person, I don't see the rationale. I think it piles on too much stress onto an already chronically stressful life. So when you're doing your workouts and then you're going home and you're preparing a keto meal in the name of stimulating autophagy, or you're waiting until 12 noon to eat your first meal because you want to have a shorter time window because you get all these anti-inflammatory, immune boosting, and autophagy benefits. The science and the research is all there. And I don't retract anything that Mark Sisson and I have written in our books, like the Keto Reset Diet, where we present how to do keto the right way. But in my personal example, I am obsessed with performance and recovery as an athlete. And the science is clear on this matter that the single best intervention ever discovered for longevity is fitness. And quote from Peter Attia, nothing else even comes close. Peter also adds that he used to think it was diet. And then he changed his mind in light of the emerging research that if you stay fit and if you maintain functional muscle mass and cardiovascular conditioning throughout life, you are going to sail past the disease risk factors that are getting us in droves as the norm today. And you're going to have the best chance at leading a long, healthy, happy, active life. So today, my new mantra for the rest of my life is perform, recover, perform, recover. And that is my total focus. And I want almost all of my stress capacity to go to difficult, challenging workouts and recovery from those workouts. So getting back to the topic, do I need to throw in fasting or carb restriction in the name of becoming a healthier person? I don't think so. I think it's better to allocate those energetic resources and those stress hormones to the workouts and then instead strive for maximum cellular energy status at all times. So I'm going to finish my sprint workout this morning, come right home and prepare a recovery smoothie with the awesome B-Rad Whey Protein Superfuel. Thanks for the commercial. And now back to the show. And I'm also not going to restrict my eating times, except for, try not to eat much after dark. And I'm still in a 12-hour eating window, right? Or whatever that is. So that's a recalibration from trying to figure out this winning strategy of, I fast a few days and then, another day I do a long workout and then I do these keto cycles. These are tools that are highly effective for people that need to lose excess body fat and correct their adverse blood values. So if you are at or near your ideal body composition and you have good blood work, you don't have disease risk factors, I don't see the rationale for restricting diet. However, what we all desperately need to do better is restrict our intake of processed foods. And so when you title your show, Eat Clean, if you're not doing that, people, you might as well not listen to any other show until you clear your cupboards from the crap, because then you don't even have a fighting chance of metabolic health until you clean up your diet. So I'm in favor of eating to your heart's content of natural, nutritious, wholesome foods that are easy to digest. So that's a little plug for the carnivore and the great guests you've had talking about how some of these plant foods that are lauded as nutritional superstars might be difficult to digest for certain people. And so I want easy to digest, nutrient dense foods to my heart's content. And guess what's going to happen if you avoid processed foods, eat nutritious foods? Your appetite and satiety mechanisms are going to guide you perfectly to an optimal amount of caloric intake. And then we're going to honor the recommendation from Dr. Tommy Wood, one of the smartest guys in the space and super fit himself and active and energetic. He says he counsels his active fit clients to eat as much nutritious food as possible until they gain a pound of fat. And then you dial it back a little bit. And that's when you know you're optimal. It's not when you're goofing around with a tighter eating window or tracking your macros and trying to get your carbs from 100 to 50. It's finding as much nutritious food that you need and that you desire to eat. And that will, carry you to good performance and recovery. And oh, by the way, there are almost zero examples of restrictive eating strategies amongst elite athletes across all sport. That's from Lindsay Barra. She's the host of a podcast where she interviews athletes about their eating habits.
Yeah,
and we just don't see it.
We don't see it. Your podcast,
right?
That's
wait a second,
daughter.
Brad and Brian. What about all the guys on Game Changers? Well, that thing's been torched by experts like Chris Kresser, where some of these guys were saying they felt great on vegan diet, but then they switched to a more wholesome, nutritious diet. Some of them had career-ending injuries and all this kind of thing. So it's suffice to say that when you're looking at your NFL game on the weekend, or you're watching an NBA game, or you're watching the Olympics, these athletes are fueling themselves, going for full cellular energy status. I will say that some of them could deserve to, clean up their diet a bit, but they're not fasting until noon. I promise you that.
A lot of points there. And I agree with that, obviously, a lot of it. I will say that, I got into the game of fasting. I thought it was intriguing, something that I just wanted to experiment for myself. And so if you've never really done any type of fasting, I do say it's worth trying a little bit, because it does give you the mental wherewithal and to understand sort of what is true hunger and what isn't, because I think we're in a society where most people aren't in that top echelon of athletes and top athletes or bodybuilders or whatever, where they can sort of almost do whatever and they'll be all right to some degree. But you talk about over restrictive. Yes, I think you can take fasting too far. I will say that, like you said briefly, is I like sort of this. I don't know if anyone else has coined this term, but the bumper approach of fasting, where you're giving yourself buffers on each side of the start of the day and the end of the day, where you're not necessarily getting up right away and eating stuffing your face right away. You're giving it a little bit of time, and then to the end of the day, giving yourself some time as well. And I think for some people, it gives them boundaries around their day. So I agree. I think I was somewhat obsessive about my time periods of fasting, and it can be a little bit, I don't know. You could become over. I'm not trying to think of the word, but you could be overzealous on trying to fit your windows. Oh, I got to finish by this second. I don't think you need to be obsessive about it, but it can give you boundaries. And you talk about process versus non-process. I actually did a micro podcast a few weeks ago, and it was a 1 month study. I won't go into a ton of detail, but it was interesting. It took subjects and they followed an ultra processed diet for 2 weeks, and then a non-processed diet for another 2 weeks. And the menu sort of rotated on a 7-day schedule. And they were all matched across the diets for total calories, energy density, macronutrients, fiber, sugar, sodium. But these diets were widely differing as far as what was in them, right? So you got processed foods. There was obviously less fiber involved. Ultra processed versus the unprocessed version. And what happened was the people that ate the unprocessed the processed version ate 500 calories more a day compared to the unprocessed. So they ended up gaining weight on the highly processed diet because what they were eating was not satisfying them, and they ended up eating more per day, which in the long haul, calories do play a role. They're not everything, but they ended up putting on weight, body fat mass because of that. So yeah, just to go off your point. So I think that, like, just to sum it, like, fasting is a tool. It can be overdone. And I was overdoing it probably for a while now. I've added in more food into my diet, but I think, I think, like, the takeaway, go ahead.
You're an orange strap guy, man. So get off it for a second.
Well, people don't know what that is, but
he's stretching the super incredibly difficult stretch band on the X3 bar. So I should follow up my blather there, saying that 96% of the people I know would probably benefit from some fasting, a keto exercise to improve metabolic flexibility, and playing around with the various ways that we can restrict our unfettered access to indulgent foods, which is what we have today. So anything will work. Anything. Wait until 12 to eat your breakfast, because then you're going to eat fewer calories over the course of the day. Peter T. have said this too. Like, the time restricted feeding has no inherent benefit besides a default restriction of calories, because you have less time to eat calories. So it's not like the body works better because you give your digestive system a break from 8 a.m. to 12 noon. That's been refuted by science, except when you have a shitty breakfast and you feel better fasting until noon. Well, let's take a look at your breakfast. Jay Feldman said that on my show. He's like, if you claim to feel better skipping breakfast, let's take a look at that nasty ass breakfast that you're having every day. And that's why you're feeling better. But if you can wake up and, my transition to answer the question, like things I've changed my mind about, I typically wouldn't eat much food in the morning hours, and then I have a big meal in the midday. Now I get up and I deliberately chow a huge bowl of fresh fruit and a very robust, high protein super fuel smoothie with a bunch of other stuff thrown in there. So I'm starting my day. Of course, I work out before that, but I'm starting the rest of the day fully fueled, rather than mixing in the concurrent stressors of a workout and fasting after the workout.
Yeah. And that's a good point. And I will just say that I think that if you are going to maybe skip a meal or maybe have a lighter meal, I think you're probably better off having that lighter meal later in the day, because they have shown that you are more insulin sensitive early on, and early on in the day. So also too, Dr. Don Layman had talked about it on my podcast, is prioritizing protein, especially early on in the day, can help sort of create a cascade of events within, just obviously, meeting your protein requirements first and foremost, which most people don't. I know I wasn't for a while when I was fasting, and I think a lot of people undereat that macronutrient. We know that it's fairly satiating to eat protein. So I think, I think there is no perfect window. And like you said, if you're an athlete, you probably don't need much of a window. But for some people, they might need a little bit of a window, because it sort of guides them, and it creates boundaries throughout the day for eating.
Yeah, it's tough. It's a battle. And we haven't neither of us are experts on emotional attachments to eating and eating disorders, but there's a lot of things that we can do to clean up our act in terms of our behavior patterns, our food choices, and all that. And there's a zillion trillion great books about it. One of them is the Keto Reset Diet, where it's like, if you can go through this 6 weeks exercise to teach your body to burn fat really efficiently and also manufacture ketones in place of glucose, you're going to be better off for it and more metabolically flexible. But let's aspire for all of us to get more active, get moving more, do more, general everyday movement. And maybe that'll even, increase your appetite for nutritious foods and become a clean, burning, active, energetic machine. So it's sort of like this eat more, move more. One of my readers coined that in an email. I'm like, that's brilliant. It's the eat more, move more approach to longevity. Yeah. Anyone want to battle that? You get that mofo on your show next week. And if you're telling me that if you just shut down your, don't exercise much and also don't eat much, and you'll live to 100, I'm going to say, first of all, no, thank you, because I enjoy eating and exercising. And then second of all, I'm going to say, you're flat out wrong, man. We're energetic beings. We need fuel and energy, and we need to put it to good use instead of sit on our butt all day.
Yeah. And I'll just add one more thing and we can move on. The one thing that doing fasting can help individuals with is if they're having some gut issues, and the foods that we're eating, they were eating before they started doing some type of fasting, it was causing them issues. And we know that there's plenty of gut stressors that individuals, even just modern wheat and things like that, or, lectins and things like that are in foods. And sometimes when people do start fasting, they start feeling really good because they're eliminating a lot of these gut stressors that they were consuming on a daily basis. So,
good point. Yeah.
Okay. So, what's one other one that you've changed your mind?
That's two. We've been talking about performing and recovering and allocating my stress resources toward ambitious workouts. Of course, I have to allocate a little slice of that pie to lawsuits when the insurance company rips me off, and traffic jams and things that we face in life, right? But I want to allocate most of those stress resources to the thing that's going to give me the best return on investment. So where does the other stuff fall in? Like being a devoted cold plunge enthusiast for many years and a devoted enthusiast to fasting for many years. How about sauna? How about all these other ways that we can create hormetic stressors, as they're known? But if you put them all together and stack them up on one side of the scale, we want to make sure that the scales of justice are balanced, where we have rest, recovery, restoration. So with my cold plunge practice specifically, what I've done is I've toned down my incredibly intense devotion and the need to go every single day, and see how adapted I can get to go from 3 minutes to 4 minutes to 5 minutes to 6 minutes at 38°F was my top performance when I'm trying to show off and put a video up on social media or something. So now I enjoy the practice in a more casual manner for a much shorter duration. I oftentimes just put my legs in after workouts and not my whole body. So I deliberately don't do a therapeutic cold exposure session like I would do independently from workout, because I already stress myself at the running track. So I'm just toning down this concept of throwing in as many hormetic stressors as you can, because what doesn't kill you make you stronger. Jay Feldman has 2 great articles on his website about hormesis. You can easily search for those, or if you want to put them in the links. And he says, wait, we also have to remember that, quote, the effects of stress are cumulative. So one cold plunge, hey, spike in norepinephrine and dopamine, sustained, lasting for an hour at 200 to 300% baseline. So you feel alert, energized, fantastic, anti-inflammatory, immune boosting, all these benefits. But let's talk in 27 years after I've done 4,893 cold plunges. Is this stuff going to wear out the poor old man that keeps doing it? That's arguably what we're looking at here. Same with fasting, where people are touting the 1 meal a day strategy because they've cleaned up their gut health, they've lost weight. It's fantastic. It's wonderful. But let's talk to all the OMOD people after 20 freaking years of only eating 1 meal a day and see how you're doing with your protein requirements, and whether you're catabolizing lean muscle tissue from the hours of 8 a.m. until 3 p.m. when you stuff your face with whatever meal that is.
Okay. So you've changed your mind on, these hormetic stressors that are stacked upon each other that could cause too much stress, because they all go into the same stress bucket, whether it's cold plunging or, someone cuts you off when you're driving and, or your work or whatever's happening that's stressing you out. So, right. I think this is something to pay attention to. It's something that I've been more vigilant about, is because I do have a cold plunge that's about 50 yards behind me, whatever, 30 yards behind me, that I could use all the time. It's interesting. I had a buddy who got the same cold plunge that I got, and he's like way into it. And he sends me a text about like how many times and this and that, and he's going in it like every day. And I just said to him, I said, I would just, keep an eye on that, not overdo it. It is a stressor. I think he was going like 6 days a week. Like for me, I typically it's more of like a feeling. I don't go in the cold plunge on a day of resistance training, because there has been some studies showing that, when you do resistance training, you're causing this inflammatory response in the body. And so if you're going to go into a cold plunge after you do a lift, you're sort of refuting what just happened, or you're not allowing yourself to sort of recover and rebuild, because then you're going into this anti-inflammatory state when you're in the cold plunge, if that makes sense for people. So I actually do my cold plunging on my off days if I'm going to do them. You could do them if you go for a run. I'm just talking about for resistance training. You don't really want to do a lift and then go into a plunge. So anyways, that's how I sort of look at them. And like you said, it's just something you want to sort of, I'm sure there's individuals who can handle more stress than others, right? But like, if you don't, anyways, it's just, so you've changed your mind on that, which is,
well, it's just if you're not doing much and you're a commuter and you're sitting in front of a screen for 8 hours a day, man, I would say throw all that stuff on. Like I'm hanging out with my buddies at the beach, and I'm like, come on, let's go do an ocean plunge. Oh no, it's too cold right now. You've been sitting on your ass all day in a working office environment. Let's get the body some action, man. So whatever it takes, and that's hot sauna, cold plunge. These things are super health boosting, especially the sauna research where they have an increase in life expectancy. So we can't wither from lack of stimulus to the organism, but I'm advocating that your best return on investment is going to be from actual exercise and movement. And then you can, sprinkle in these other things to be as badass as possible, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I just did a micro podcast on infrared saunas, and the one thing I thought that was really interesting about it is it creates it's this passive cardio activity, okay, that the sauna session stimulates this circulation similar to exercise, giving you like another tool, right, for yourself to use as almost, like a way of exercising, but without the physical demands of it, typically.
Right.
So
it's literally a cardiovascular workout.
Right. And not to say that that should be your only thing, but, let's just say you're injured or you've had a long week, you weren't able to work out, but, you go for a couple saunas sessions. Well, it's sort of a way to mimic exercising without the physical demands. So pretty cool. I was reading a bit about that. Okay, let's do one more, and then we'll call it a day. Is there one more thing you wanted to touch on that you've changed your mind on over the years?
Yeah, I mean, I've spent most of my life as a endurance athlete, not in recent years, but for decades. The start of my day was to take my dog out for a 30 or 40 or 20-minute steady state, low intensity cardiovascular run.
Okay, and
now I realize that there's really no justification for doing that. The fitness benefits are minimal in comparison to the big picture, the big ticket items like resistance training and explosive sprinting and any type of explosive exercise. These are the things that are going to get you the most return for your longevity and overall health and vitality, and come with less risk than steady state cardio, which has tremendous risk factors when you overdo it. And the problem with this widespread obsession with zone 2 is that it's mostly zone 2.5 or 2.7, and people are thinking that they're doing zone 2 comfortably paced, fat burning emphasis, and they're not. They're going too hard because of lack of knowledge, lack of awareness, poor calculations, got the wrong information. But your fat max heart rate, or your zone 2 limit, is extremely comfortable. It's so comfortable and so non-strenuous that it doesn't really feel like a workout. And so when I go into a busy gym and look at the people on the stair machines and the ellipticals and the treadmills with their red face and their panting, they're way beyond what is an appropriate aerobic training stimulation. And they're into what Mark Sisson has called chronic cardio, where they're producing too many stress hormones in a chronic manner, and they're going to suffer from breakdown, burnout, illness, and injury. And the running population of serious runners, the stats are so disturbing that we really need to wake up and have a widespread commitment to slowing down to get the proper workout stimulation. So emphasizing true zone 1 and zone 2 cardio, which means you're living an active, energetic life. If you want to do it with minimal risk, you walk, because walking is low impact. It doesn't have all those problems with going out for steady state cardio running and getting injured and getting sick and getting tired and burnt out. And also, with the most prominent goal of the fitness population being to reduce excess body fat, walking is going to help you drop excess body fat more than steady state running at a higher pace. Because what happens when you push the body up into those slightly elevated glucose burning zones is you increase your appetite. And it might happen 12 hours later where you're hitting the pint of Ben & Jerry's because you ran 6 a.m. with your friend at the park and your friend's faster than you. And this has been a pattern that's been going on for the entire duration of the running boom, 6 decades. And people are still widely struggling with excess body fat, despite a sincere commitment to putting in a lot of miles every week running. And if they just slow down and sprinkled in the proper biggest payoff workouts, which are resistance training, where you're putting the muscles under load, and explosive all-out sprinting. Doesn't have to be high impact. It could be on the stationary bike. It could be on the VersaClimber. It could be on kettlebell swings for 10 seconds on and 1 or 2 minutes off. That's the stuff that will keep you active, energetic, and muscular, and keeping the body fat off, rather than the jogging or the using the cardio machines at slightly to significantly elevated heart rates.
Okay, so your point is, if you have 20, 30 minutes, instead of doing some type of steady state cardio, you're best off doing some type of resistance training.
Well,
if you're going to,
you're better off doing all of it, right? So if you have, we want to hit that cardio objective in life because we don't move enough now. But the best way to do it is walk the dog for 7 minutes in the morning, walk the dog for 7 minutes in the evening, once a week. On the weekend, if you want to go for a run in the park or go for a hike, that's great. And then we also have those minimum necessary dose of strength training, where you got to put your muscles under resistance load a couple times a week, or you're going to get old and hunched over and frail, and you're going to fall. So it's really simple. It's not time consuming, but we have to hit the checkpoints. We can't just think that we're going to run 40 miles a week to longevity, when the truth is you're going to run to an early grave in many ways.
And I'll just add one more thing on that. Would you rather, not that it's always a vanity thing, but would you rather look like a sprinter or the guys that are running these marathons or ultra marathons that look like if a big gust of wind comes, they're done. There are unbelievable. Yeah.
There are no fat sprinters. There are none.
Right.
Now, if you look at the marathon population, there was a study at the Cape Town Marathon, South Africa. 30% of the entrants had a BMI, body composition, outside the healthy range. So 30% of the runners were fat. And the World Health Organization...
For the marathon runners?
For the marathon entrants. 30%. World Health Organization statistics says 30% of the global population is overweight or obese. And so when you can't tell the difference between a spectator and a marathon runner, we have a problem with the sport and the way it's approached. And I don't mean to offend anybody here, because there's all kinds of things in the background. People are doing the best they can. Anyone who's out there exercising is, vastly superior to someone who doesn't, disregards the human body and just sits around all day. But if we just slow down, things will feel so much better. And if you slow down, you'll have energy to get into your home basement facility and pull the X3 bar a few times, or get on the stationary bike. I have one of those Carol bikes where it has an 8-minute workout involving a couple sprints or more than that. But you sprint all out and you get a tremendous fitness response in the muscles and the cardiovascular system in a fraction of the time that jogging an hour or climbing the stairs for an hour in the gym turns you into.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, don't get me wrong. I mean, doing something is better than nothing. I mean, yes, you can overdo any of these, but like, yes, I mean, I rather look like a sprinter than a marathon runner. And you can still do some type of cardiovascular. I don't know. For me, like I use a Rogue Echo bike. I could be on and off that thing in like 5 to 8 minutes.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
and be done
Fantastic.
and tax myself. But you want to obviously use that sparingly. I don't do it like every other day, maybe once or twice a week of doing something like that, because that bike is, the real deal.
But any person in an office environment can push that chair back and do a set of 20 deep squats right now to break up the stillness and the change in hormonal and metabolic function that happens when you're still, even for short periods of time. And these can, when you sprinkle them in, I call them micro workouts, over the course of a year. If you hit that pull-up bar that's under the doorway few times a week for 5 reps, we're talking about 750 pull-ups over the course of the year, just because you walked through the doorway and you said, okay, I'll take 12 seconds of my busy day or 30 seconds. And so that's the part where we need to change the mentality from struggle, suffer for an hour-long cardio session, go home, have Ben and Jerry's 12 hours later, to a fitness-oriented lifestyle where we can sprinkle in these short bursts of explosive effort. You can pull the stretch cords. You can do one set of X3 bar that takes 30 seconds and then go about your busy day.
Yeah. Micro workouts, sprinkle them in. Consistency over perfection.
Nice. All right.
All right, Brad. Well, this was great. We could probably go for a long time, but I appreciate you coming on the podcast. Check out Brad. He's got the B-Rad podcast, which I love. I listen to your podcast all the time, and I know you have. Tell us a little. You got a whey protein, right? Which I love. Has creatine in it, and I've had it, and it tastes great. What else? Anything else?
Oh my goodness. If you visit bradkearns.com, you could see these nutrition products that I have going. I'm trying to make the very best, highest quality protein out there, and we're coming up with some new products shortly. The podcast is a great way to connect. Send me an email. We love to answer and connect with everybody, and we're all in this together. And the more awareness we can get, and take these small baby steps every day, they really add up over time.
Yeah. So check them out. I'll put a link in the show notes, bradkearns.com. You can find everything you need. So thanks, Brad, for coming on.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. I understand there are millions of other podcasts out there, and you've chosen to listen to mine, and I appreciate that. Check out the show notes at briangryn.com for everything that was mentioned in this episode. Feel free to subscribe to the podcast and share it with a friend or family member that's looking to get their body back to what it once was. Thanks again, and have a great day.